Good morning, everybody. It's Nissa, the Hypnobirthing midwife, and welcome to Monday Mums Club. And we've got a great guest today, and I'm going to hand it over to her to say a little bit about who she is. And then we're going to hear some good stuff from her, and there's time for a Q&A today, which will be super useful. So welcome. Hello.
Hello, hi. Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for that, Nissa. Hi, I'm Elisha, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I have a special interest, I suppose, in pregnancy and birth and how we care for ourselves and our mental health around this time. I suppose a little bit I met Nissa when we did I did my first year of midwifery training, and then I stepped off the course, but I did a year with Nissa. So that's how I know Nissa. And that time sparked an interest that has continued around this time, around pregnancy and birth and the antenatal period too. Today I realize if there is anything that anyone wants to ask, I think, Nissa, and I'm going to ask, I just was mulling this over just now, that if any questions come in that anyone has, that at any point, please do, I don't know how you can ask that if you don't want it public, that's okay too. If this is being recorded and to go out, if anyone wants to ask later, or maybe I can put my email or something like that, so that it's, or you might feel okay about asking, just however it feels.
Let me say, Elisha, for questions when we get to that, you can pop a question into the chat box and it can go to the whole group, it can go just to Elisha, or it can go just to me, and I can tell Elisha, so whatever feels comfortable is perfect.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I do have a little bit of a kind of I suppose something to say around, I mean, mental health in itself is a huge topic, that it is as an individual as there are people. And what mental health means to each of us is something different. So I will try and cover some of the broader topics, kind of the brush strokes around pregnancy and birth and the postnatal time. For me, I think becoming pregnant, by the time a woman is pregnant, they will have been on such an individual journey anyway, and whether that is however they have become, or any of you have ever become pregnant. I don't know if all of you here are, or if anyone listening is pregnant, or our individual journeys kind of continue with us through pregnancy. And the pregnancy itself, I suppose, that it is both physical, emotional, it encompasses all of us. What can happen over pregnancy, I suppose, as the baby grows, but also we grow towards motherhood, that our relationships with others can change, and our relationships with ourselves change, and our identity, and we can question whether this is a first, second, third, fourth pregnancy, whatever the previous, whether that it is on we have other children, whether we don't have other children, whether we have stepchildren, however it is, that journey to that particular relationship with that child, everything can kind of come up and be questioned. And I suppose because this is around, when we talk about mental health, it quite often comes with the possibility of negative thoughts. And I don't want to say that all of it is negative, but I suppose I suppose today, the parts that are challenging, the parts that are more difficult, and there can be new anxieties, new feelings, new emotions that arise during pregnancy that have possibly never been there before. And sometimes also, if there was something in our histories, whatever it is, can kind of come up again. And whether that's anxieties, and we were like, but that was when I was 16 and I've had nothing since and I'm fine, and suddenly it's presenting, or something similar is presenting itself again. Or sometimes we come into pregnancies with a psychiatric diagnosis already, and we're then navigating becoming a mother with that. I suppose as a background to all of that as well is kind of how do we, each of us, how does it feel individually? Now, it's really, really common, normal to feel some anxieties, to feel some possibly depression, to question things, to be challenged, to not know how to, these new feelings are really normal and common in pregnancy. I suppose it's almost like how much are they taking over our lives or not? Sometimes it comes and it passes and it's like, okay, that might have been a week, that might have been 3 weeks, it's gone, it's fine. Sometimes it can be a matter of hours. And it's kind of an individual response of this is too much, this is or not. Quite often as women, we will keep going regardless, and it might be a loved one that notices that something is up. We might notice with friends before we notice ourselves, especially, well, not even especially, but yeah, often in a first pregnancy of just is this normal? I've never experienced this before. I think this must be just normal pregnancy stuff, especially when it comes around the narrative of postnatal depression. Or the kind of baby blues that it gets called, and the kind of dismissing of it for weeks and weeks, or just, oh, I'm tired, that's all it is. I kind of, another part, so that's that around that kind of knowing for oneself how long, what feels okay, what isn't okay, and noticing. And I will touch on some of the different presentations of different things that are quite common. But I suppose I wanted to also just touch on where we are today. And, what are we there? Is it the 15th of March, 2021? Excellent. As I'm trying to remember we're coming up to a year almost of pandemic lockdown. Our lives as they were no longer the same. Some of us might be relishing it, some of us might be struggling, some of us might be really okay with it, but whatever it is, our lives probably look really different to how they did a year ago. And then if, I don't know, but if some are pregnant now and they weren't a year ago as well, and that added in, and not seen family or have seen family, there is, I suppose, I kind of hold that in mind too, because what has happened to maternity care over the last year will be adding to many anxieties and many thoughts and fears, possibly around antenatal appointments, the birth itself, what is or isn't allowed, as guidelines keep changing, whether midwife appointments are in person or via Zoom or phone. So all of these things, I suppose I hold that too. I'm aware through my work that it's been really, really hard for many women, and well, for anyone having a baby. Also, I suppose I want to just very briefly, I don't want to become too political with this, but a little bit around even within the last week and some of the news that's come up, and it's been for many quite a heavy week around even whatever our individual thoughts are on Meghan Markle, but what she spoke about in suicidal thoughts during pregnancy, and then our own safety on the streets with what's happened with Sarah's murder, and even just, I suppose, all of this in the context of being quite, the fact that we're doing this even on Zoom in the first place, we're not in person, and how that is at this time. So I suppose I'm holding some of that as well in mind. Another bit, I suppose, that comes in is even whatever our political leanings are, or our financial situations, those kind of histories that come into play in pregnancy, all of that can present and feel quite heightened. whether we will have enough money to support ourselves, what it means as women to step back from a career and that identity. So all of that, it's almost like that all comes into a bit of a funnel of 9 months. For many women, again, it can feel like time's running out. Like at the end of this, whatever's going to happen, it will be different. That doesn't mean negative. Just as I know the world today, it will be different at the end of the pregnancy, whenever the end of that pregnancy is. So that's, I suppose, is a little bit of a background of even coming into pregnancy. Just want to say, I as a psychotherapist, I don't diagnose. So kind of that's not my position to diagnose. That's what a psychiatrist will do. However, yeah, and I suppose I just want to put that out there for today. I will briefly touch on, as I was saying, some of what can the presentations of some of these thoughts and behaviors and feelings, and we can label them, but in effect they're kind of clusters of feelings and physical, emotional, and responses to whatever those situations are. So when I talk about anxiety, that it's kind of as something that is actually often dismissed in pregnancy, little less so now, but that it's more, in pregnancy, almost this is a time when women are just supposed to be happy, or that's what we tell ourselves. And when that isn't the case, it's almost like we can become trapped between what we think we should be feeling and what we are feeling. And almost in that space in between is where anxiety, it loves that space in between. And with anxiety, I suppose I'll give some of the feelings of it. It's kind of, I'm sure many of you have experienced elements of it, but the kind of the heart thumping, pounding, feeling it in your head, almost where you can't hear anything else. You can't hear someone talking. It can be so loud. Feeling sweaty. It can come out. It can express itself in hypervigilance. Around checking, I suppose, for one's own safety, for others' safety, around it often is accompanied by absolute exhaustion through the hypervigilance, but also just the relentlessness of it. It can affect our breathing, kind of a feeling that something terrible is going to happen. So that's just a very kind of brief summary. When depression also is kind of, antenatal depression is slightly less spoken about than postnatal depression, but as a kind of, as a cluster of presentations, I suppose it, and for every person it can feel different, and so many of these can cross over. And I suppose as I'm just looking at my notes so that I don't forget bits, but this is around a dampening, a dulling, a feeling, literally a depressing of ourselves, of our feelings. It's kind of, and it can often be described as a lack of, whether that's color, a lack of sound, a lack of joy, a lack of excitement. The feeling of that, no motivation. There's kind of the heaviness of it. It can also be in this a feeling of there just is flat. There is no joy. There can be sadness, but it just doesn't shift. And or an emptiness, just nothingness. And that can feel kind of almost just like a void. This is some, I don't want to say this is how everyone feels. It's some of them. I would like to briefly touch upon obsessive compulsive behaviors and thoughts in pregnancy and postnatally, because they are really quite common and quite unknown by many. That in pregnancy, that it can start around counting kicks and things like that, and counting movement, and can be accompanied by kind of a fear and a terror of something happening to the baby. And therefore, by counting and being on top of the movements, almost, that is a way to know what's going on. And then the cleaning, and I suppose I mentioned that especially in light of COVID and this kind of cleaning of hands and making sure what shopping is clean, or whatever those things are, and contamination. Obsessive compulsive behaviors and thoughts can present really quite differently and quite startling in the postnatal period, and that can be around thoughts around harming the baby, but almost a fear that that's going to happen. There's actually that they almost everything in the behavior itself, if I separate the thoughts and the behavior is absolutely to stop anything happening. So that will be, for example, if the fear is that you're going to maybe drop your baby while walking out on the road, everything you will do will be to make sure you're not holding your baby walking down the road, whether that's someone else holding your baby, whether that's, or sometimes it can be even more active than that whatever you're thinking will be, it can be sexual thoughts around the baby, and not of kind of sexual assault on the baby. And I suppose I mention this because it's something that's rarely spoken about and aren't uncommon. And it's not that you ever want to do anything, it's the fear that somehow you might accidentally do something, even though you don't want to do it. I won't go into too much around that, but I suppose that's how it can present. And there's something of knowing that absolutely everything you are doing, you're not going to be doing something to your baby, that this is not, that the behaviors usually are the sign, even if the thoughts are so distressing, that you are doing everything you can never to harm your baby. I suppose I'll kind of quickly go into the postpartum psychosis, and that is a very, I won't dwell on that too much, other than that is in itself is actually a medical emergency. And that is, I suppose, around psychosis is around, if anything, it's kind of recognizing if it happens to call an ambulance, or if you recognize someone else going, and that can swing between someone believing that they are in a different world. When you notice when someone is in almost in euphoric, when I say euphoric, joy, but extreme, where like you find out that maybe, or yourself, that you haven't slept for 3 days and you are manically cleaning the house and everything is fine, and it's almost like these are little alarm bells of something here is not okay. Again, I won't go into that one too much just now, but if anyone has questions, please do ask. Very briefly, I suppose this is the last little bit before I'll open it up, is around birth trauma, and how, I suppose as a term, it's almost self-explanatory that there has been something, it's usually a perceived threat of death or serious injury to both either yourself or the baby during the birth, and then that can present in sometimes a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, that will kind of come in intrusive thoughts, so a replaying relentlessly of the birth, or of the time leading up to it or afterwards, where even when you're not meaning to, it keeps coming back and looping on it. Flashbacks, almost, where you momentarily don't know if you are in the present moment or you are in that time. It becomes blurred between what is now and then. Again, it's kind of nightmares, hypervigilance around the baby, really trying to be particularly, making sure that nothing comes near the baby that could hurt the baby. I mean, these are, to some extent, every, I think, parent wants that and does that. But when it becomes, when the balance is out of kilter, when you are unable to live your life as you would like to because of the behaviors you are doing to protect your baby. Also, birth trauma can be accompanied by depression and a feeling of a kind of a giving up, that no one listened to me, this is just how it is, there was nothing I could do, there was nothing anyone else could do. That kind of giving up feeling and guilt, that I could have done, maybe I could have done it differently, maybe if I'd done this differently or prepared, or I realize that I've spoken quite relentlessly here for a little while. I don't know if there are questions. I see some things, but I'm not sure what's come up. I haven't seen that yet. I suppose that's as a little background, it's a kind of a flying swoop through some of what has, and I don't know if it's brought up things for any of you. If any of you need to leave, go at any point, it can be possibly quite a lot to listen to.
Thank you so much. Could I ask a quick question about something you brought up, which is those intrusive thoughts? I seem to have it a lot. I'm 35 weeks pregnant, I should say, just around like falling down the stairs, holding my child. And I just, if there's any kind of, I'm interested in what you said about avoidance and like trying to get someone else to do that particular part of the stairs, or what's your advice for trying to get rid of those thoughts?
It's a really hard one. I kind of want to say it's really hard for me to give out like direct advice. I will answer your question, but also because I suppose without knowing your history or what's come up, I suppose one thing when I spoke about it, and if it's around the part when where you were saying, if it was around when I was talking about the kind of the obsessive compulsive thoughts, and those, well, that can also come in those, and I don't know what, as I say, I don't know your history, so, but that, and we don't, however, what, something of knowing that they are thoughts, that probably if they're coming round, then it's that knowing that you're not going to, you will be doing everything to be extra cautious, that this isn't a desire, possibly, I mean, I don't know, but a desire to throw yourself down, but more the fear that that's what's going to happen if I'm not careful. Almost that part of going, oh yeah, that's what it is, it's just telling me to be careful because that could happen. There's almost that part, I suppose I'm thinking, where it comes in and you can allow it to just pass on. That is easier said than done. This isn't something that just happens like that, or like, oh, it's fine. These are common thoughts. They are, but that also, and by that I don't mean to dismiss them, to say that they're not scary thoughts. And I don't know if that quite answers. I suppose I'm thinking there are so many different things of, kind of what led to, I suppose with you being pregnant and all of those things, but it's not that I need to have all of that, but I suppose to be able to say to why someone might have those fears might stem from different things. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think there's any specific thing. It's just like, I just have this one recurring thought, like what you were saying about walking on the road. My one seems to just be falling down the stairs. So that's really useful, just to kind of accept it, like, acknowledge when it comes in, know that it's normal, and just let it pass. I think it's really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, and that bit also of knowing that it's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
So therefore, we can never say when someone might not slip on the stairs, but it's not that almost that it's there as, and possibly as a fear of what might happen if something happened to me. And that just being aware of, okay, maybe I'm, and I also, as you're, you know, as you grow, our balance, it is also, that's I suppose where I say it's such a physical thing, becoming pregnant and having a baby. If you're 31 weeks, you know, our own, we have to adjust everything.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm thinking, you know, anyone who does any kind of osteopathy, physiotherapy or anything, you know, everyone's hips, everything is out. And so we are adjusting. So where we would have stood, if we stood, you know, me not pregnant, as if I was pregnant, I'd probably fall over. So there is almost like a natural, a bit of like, well, that is a really natural response to stairs being heavily pregnant.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to share something, everybody, to kind of just acknowledge again how common they are. So when my little one was born, in the first few weeks, I had the thought, and it sounds terrible to say it, but of not just dropping, but throwing him out of the window, you know, literally tossing him out of the window. I felt very blessed to have spoken to Elisha about that previously, about lots of different things, you know, mental health topics previously around my work. And I knew that, oh, it's not because I'm going to do it. It is because it's a fear of something happening to him. So I felt lucky to know, oh, that's okay. It's not because I want to do it. It's a safety precaution. But I did tell my partner, who became very alarmed and thought, oh my goodness, you know, something's wrong. And I had to kind of try and explain to him clumsily. So I'm sure that lots of women have not that specific, but something similar.
Thank you for sharing that, Nissa. And it just reminded me, you know, that quite often these thoughts, they play almost on our greatest fear. So almost like, what if I did just pick him up and throw him out the window? Like that would be the worst thing that I could ever do. And it's almost like we go on that, and then it's like, I thought that, I'm terrible for thinking that. What if I do that? What if I didn't mean to do that? And then we can become caught in that, rather than actually that is not what I want to do at all. And it's so lovely to hear that you did have that awareness at that time, to know that that wasn't what you were wanting to do.
Nice. We'll open it up, ladies. So anybody that wants to ask something, or just talk about a topic, or share an experience, to normalize it, please feel free. You can ask out loud, or you can put it in the chat if you want to ask a little bit more privately, whatever feels comfortable.
And I can answer things kind of generically, or, you know, specifically, or however it is. As I say, it's hard to give direct advice because without working with someone, but that doesn't mean that I can't. Yeah.
I don't really have a question so much as an overall observation that it's so good to. I convinced myself that I was truly going mad. In the I kind of had visions like you're describing for about 12 days consistently, which gradually began to, which kind of abated after a while, but yeah, they were recurring, reciprocal, nightmarish, couldn't sleep, all of this kind of thing. But all I have really is an observation that there's so much focus around pregnancy and birth and labor. I wish that I'd attended something like this before, because it's really difficult in the moment to try to objectify what these thoughts are, particularly if they're really intrusive. Mine felt like something coming, but like being a level of intrusion, like this thought, kind of almost like a kind of demon taking me over. And I just think it's interesting how there's all sorts of pressures on women in loads of sorts of ways around pregnancy and birth, but it's interesting that there's not loads of public discourse around this, because it was, yeah, I mean, it's gradually gone, but it was massive. I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting that I'm wondering how I can use my experience to, I don't want to put the fear in other people, but I suppose I wish I'd been told a bit more. You might feel a bit like this, or this is a bit scary, it could possibly happen, here's some strategies, but I didn't know anything, and completely thought I was going truly mad. And I kind of convinced myself, I was like, right, I'll never return back to whatever my normal self is. So yeah,
that it sounds terrifying what you've experienced as well, and that especially during that time when you're saying that, of like, I was actually going, I felt like I was going mad, I didn't know. And I'm really sorry as well that, like you say, that there isn't the discourse out there, that people aren't as aware that this is a possibility, and that it's one of the most, I suppose I want to say, one of the most encouraging things about all of this, the kind of the mental health around pregnancy and birth, postnatal time, is that most women don't live in that same state for always. You know, it is one of the most hopeful times to work with, in a way, in that it can change. But when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't feel like it. When you're in the midst of it, if you don't know, it's like, this is going to be me forever. I will never be me again. And that, I'm thinking as a quite an existential thing, is utterly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. To almost think I'll never return back from this realm. I mean, I had similar visions to what everyone has kind of described, but I had one particular one which had nothing to do with him, or, you know, actually all those distressing things. But it was actually my brain telling me, it was like a voice. It's completely mad. It was like a voice in my head telling me, you don't love my partner Duncan. The voice was saying, you don't love him, you don't love anyone, you're kind of like, you don't have the capacity to love anyone, you're like loveless, joyless person. That was almost outside of the kind of like the visions which are about him. That was almost the most bizarre one, because it felt like it was tapping into, again, like you're saying, some sort of deep-seated fear. But yeah, whether, you know, I really feel like I'm looking at it from a distance now, but as you say, at the time, I really, really wish I'd had somebody to help me be a bit, objectify it, normalize it, kind of thing.
Almost just to kind of give, as you say, give perspective, give some space around it. And something else that kind of came to me as you were just talking is the complete lack of sleep at that point and when we are that exhausted. So almost not to forget that part, that we haven't slept, we're trying to make sense of a new identity, a new person, you know, however many babies we've had, it's like that new moment of, there's another person, the kind of the enormous responsibility that many women feel at that moment. And then to try and go, am I going mad? Try and even make sense of that. And these thoughts are coming in. And it's like, but the baby still needs me, and I still need to keep going, and I still need to just keep living.
I wonder how I can I don't know, I wonder what's best to, I don't know, I have about 5 friends who are pregnant now, and I'm kind of thinking, how can I sensitively make it known that this might be, I don't know, like I say, you don't want to make people scared, but there's something also empowering about, you know, I think there was somebody who I knew who had experienced mild psychosis after their birth, and they sent me a mantra every day saying, the thoughts aren't you, its hormones. I think it was 3 sentences that she would send to me every day, and it just helped so massively.
It was exactly that kind of thing that I was thinking. I'm aware that some people here are pregnant and are hearing it, and then there's such a deluge of information when you're pregnant, of like, almost like, I don't know how much more I can take. I'm going to get through the birth, and then I'll deal with what happens after. And so that part then of, just like you say, of being able to just reach out each day and actually hear, I mean, not that everyone has to take that responsibility for their friends, but if you wish to, checking in those first weeks, or maybe a week later, when things are usually, you know, that the kind of the guests have left. At the moment it's slightly different, but at that point, just checking in with them. And you know, it's always, I suppose it's never too late to highlight or to talk about, even if it's not before, because I suppose there is a kind of a capacity of, you know, the birth is there is a kind of a before and after. I don't know your friends in the relationship, so it might be really fine to talk to them about it, you know, and it kind of, it's that knowing, or kind of how that is with each of them.
It's so valuable to hear people's experiences. It's very much underspoken about, isn't it? There is still a taboo attached to mental health, whether we acknowledge it or not. I think that's true. And the after having a baby, yes, so many factors affect your experience. The sleep deprivation is a major one, definitely, and it can happen later. So I was quite fine after the birth, no, not too bad. And then at 4 months, the little one had the sleep regression, and then he was waking up every hour for a month. So through that month, it was August last year, towards the end of the month, I could feel my mental health beginning to slide a little bit out of view. And just to say, I think my partner could see it very much as well, because he was like, I'm not sure that you're completely normal and well. He was absolutely right. And, you know, took the little guy off, and I got some sleep. And I think in that instance, I wasn't fully aware of how much it was sliding. I think sometimes, I think you mentioned it, you don't realize yourself, you can see it in others. That's something that you come across, Elisha?
Absolutely. And it was just making me kind of go, oh yes, of course, that part, it's incremental in a way, you know. So often I see women who maybe have experienced, let's say, you know, a stillbirth or something, and then there is even then, but usually there's a clear moment of like, okay, that's why I need help. This has happened. There's an event. I can pin it on that. Therefore, I will seek help. When it happens incrementally, it doesn't mean that it's any less. It's just we don't notice it. I mean, I want to say again, I suppose, to come back to lockdown, whatever we feel about it now, it's like from the shock of it, and I want to actually say the trauma for many as well a year ago, and how it's not okay, but how normal it feels, because incrementally we have adjusted. And we're kind of okay, however we've found our ways through. And it's almost like if we had gone from, I don't know, knowing a year down the line, and yet not everyone is okay. I don't mean that it's all okay, but when things are done, it almost just turning the heat up slowly. It's like the lobster in the pot. You know, at what point do you jump? It's like, oh, it's okay. It's still, I'm okay. This isn't comfortable. It reminds me as well of a woman in labor, and when you are, and if for whatever reason you're needing syntocinon, or, you know, and then it's like when it just ramps up so fast, it's so obvious of like, okay, I might need some extra support here. Whereas sometimes if we went from, I'm thinking how we're all sitting right now, to that point, Oh, that's really obvious. When it happens really slowly, we don't notice. And in labor, that's exactly how it's meant to go. I don't mean to say that that's not how it's meant to go, as in the intensity increases, but we don't notice, we don't pick up, because we are so adjustable and so flexible, and we can be almost inching away from breaking point and not know it. Because we've adjusted to almost, it's something of like the elastic band that is stretched and stretched and stretched, and maybe we could just stretch a little bit more, and maybe the sleep is enough to just relax it a bit, to be able to stretch it again for the next day, whatever that is. And sometimes, you know, that meeting up with a friend and going for a walk is enough to just relax it, to be able to keep going for the next day. It could, whatever that thing is. Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy. We have a good question. Let me read it out. It says, I wonder if you can say more about this specific time of pandemic, lockdowns, etc., and how it can bring about old grief, especially in early pregnancy when things are more uncertain.
So yes, absolutely. I think that with lockdown, there are so many things. So for me, I this might be my own interpretation, but the initial lockdowns, and again, when it happened, you know, each time, there are multiple things that are going on for me. There is the trauma of it, the trauma of ruptured friendships, of ruptured engagements, times that we were going to meet, things in the diary, everything just stopped. And that, to me, and the loss of all of that, and that is kind of reminiscent and has a flavor of, you know, if it's around grief as well, the loss of those dreams, when someone dies, when whatever it is, that grief, whatever the grief is related to. And I think we so often dismiss smaller things through lockdown, like I was going to be going and meeting that friend. I had that concert I really wanted to go to, and I was going to go out for a meal, and all of that's gone. And the life distractions have gone too. So there is a kind of igniting of the losses that are happening that can, it's not like, you know, it's almost like we can get an essence of what that grief is like. And just because someone may not have died in that moment, let's say if it is related to the loss of a loved one, it's like it pulls on the memory of that loss. Also, I think the question was something around pregnancy loss and early, is that correct? I think if that was something around and for me, I think that's right. And please, if it's not, do say if it was something else, but around, there has been a reduction in, again, I want to say this is my experience, and I kind of, as much as I can understand of what's happening around in the world, but kind of the control and what we felt we had control over has changed. So, you know, even kind of, I live near Gatwick and there are no planes. I actually originally come from Australia, and I've always had this feeling of I could go to Australia if I wanted to, and right now I can't. And it's fine, I have no plans to go, but that has been shut off to me. And that's just, I suppose, one of many of these controls that we thought we had control over particular parts of our life, that I could have come up to London, Nissa, and seen you. That was something that was absolutely understandable, and I have no control over that now. And I suppose when in early losses, I think, wait, let me see, what was the question? Because I do want to, especially in early pregnancy when things are more uncertain. And I think that's right. That's what I was around, the uncertainty of, you know, goalposts are being changed. We don't know even if we can go and get that scan with our partner or with a loved one, someone to be there, or am I going to be alone or not? Or because of the restrictions, and there is something of, and I don't want to, you know, we all again are in this lockdown with our own histories and our own experiences of COVID and what has gone on, and yet there are times, you know, when I I suppose women going in for an early scan and we're told that it's for someone else's health or their benefit that I can't take my partner with me or someone with me to be with me. And in that moment when you are terrified that you are losing a baby, it doesn't make sense in that moment for that woman that someone, it's like, how can that, but I matter, and we're told almost we don't matter. And I don't want to kind of say that it's not the right thing, but it's a really difficult situation to make sense of when you are feeling terror and fear around so I don't know if that answers it, and I think that question, but it really can. So grief can be ignited in this because of almost all the little losses and the big losses, and hearing about losses, and love of people dying. If there is more on that, please do. Like, if I haven't quite answered that question, please do say.
I think that was really helpful, Elisha. You're connecting up the threads that probably we don't all see a lot of the time. There's a couple of messages. Let me read one out to you. In my third trimester, I've been having a feeling of loneliness, despite having a very supportive partner who is a gem. I put it down to us both working long hours and hormones and tiredness on my side, planning on taking some time off work to recoup, but it's hard to know whether this is normal, pregnancy related, or lockdown related. Not sure if I'm really asking anything specific, but more of a general observation.
Oh, that sounds so hard. And I think, I don't know, I suppose I can't say, and as you say, it's not a direct question, and also I don't know specifically, but something I am really conscious of is all the new mothers, all the pregnant women, and you too in this, that all the antenatal groups, all the hugs that we could be having, that we could be sitting in a room with like-minded or not like-minded people, whatever is the right thing for us. But in pregnancy, in that coming, the connecting with others, there is something for me about in person, that we sense things from each other that we don't, and we actually get so much more from each other than we realize, that can be lost online. It's not to say that online is amazing. I mean, my goodness, am I grateful for it now, but it's so almost like that connection of feeling just content, and that doesn't, and as I really hear that bit is that you were saying of around, it's not that your partner isn't wonderful. It's almost like, but there's something not there, something more, which would be that possibly it's antenatal classes, possibly not. For some, that's the worst thing in the world and not something they want to do. I was just reminded of, I remember years ago hearing about this, when someone walks into a room, and even if we don't know them, we sense them. Okay, I'm not talking like conference size room, but someone into a room, and we have a sense, often, not always correct, and with some people it's quite difficult, but of what their mood might be, without even necessarily looking. And that's something of that connecting with others that actually is, we talk about it with babies as well, of how we communicate with them, what's going on, the mirror neurons and all of those things of how we communicate. It happens between adults too, and we need it to feel connected. We are social beings. We live in relation to others. We can't live, we can live by ourselves if that's our choice, to go and isolate ourselves. But even when we do that, we're still in relation to, even if it's the memory of those people, but that's an active choice. That's very different than being cut off. A little bit of a roundabout answering there of that, but that just, the loneliness, it can be both. It can be both the tiredness, the just lethargy of the end of pregnancy and lockdown, and the kind of, if you do decide to meet people and it's cold and wet outside, or however it feels right for you to meet people, it's really hard, really, really hard.
There's a comment, Elisha, from another mum. I'll read it out. So this is a response to the previous kind of thought or question. So I think this is really valuable to read. It says, I have the same feelings. I'm 35 weeks and my mother keeps saying, but you have an amazing partner. I'm really craving more distraction and connection.
Yeah. It is, and in a way, sometimes being told that you have a wonderful partner is like, you kind of go, yeah, I know. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying I feel really lonely and it's really hard. And almost sometimes it just needs someone to go, yeah, it's shit. Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to say that here. But, you know, it's just really hard. And without any, and that's enough of a sentence. Because it's almost, there is this idea of, what is it called, like a zero summing our feelings, or the kind of, well, at least you've got this, or it's okay because, and it's like, well, no, that they're two different things. There is a certain element of human distraction, and that we actually find out about ourselves in relation to others, that's needed. And yeah, I think I don't know if there's more that I can I'm also conscious of the time, of whether there are others that are, you know,
I know, guys, we were actually at times. So, and Elisha's a very busy woman. I think there's one. Have you got time for one last question?
I do. I can do one more.
I'll read it out. Here it is. Just a quick one, ladies. We could listen to you speak all day, to be honest. Here it says, did anyone else have this fear of loss at the beginning? I'm 20 weeks now and yet to feel kicks, so not feeling the baby yet, which is very normal. Have my next scan next week and can wait, as just want to see the baby again and know everything is going okay. If anyone else did have this fear at the beginning, did it get better for you as the pregnancy developed, when you could monitor and feel movements, etc., or any other advice around this, on how to deal with this?
So it's a really good question. And I want to say, I have seen many, many women who have experienced this, and I'm sure others here can maybe have a similar, but in early pregnancy, it is a really common feeling of, how do I know? How do I know what's going on? And I want to say, for some women, and this is, that might not give quite the reassurance, for some women, feeling the kicks can absolutely change it for them and can be everything that was needed to feel okay. For others, it might almost, that fear might latch onto something else. But often through feeling the baby move, those fears do lessen. That feeling the baby move is a really powerful and connecting experience, not for everyone, for some, but for most, especially when there has been a fear around loss before feeling the baby. Advice, I don't have specific advice I at this point, without knowing kind of almost where that comes from, that question. But that it's a really common, I suppose I want to say, and there isn't the kind of I really hope that your scan comes around very soon, if that offers reassurance. I don't know if anyone else who is pregnant right now who experiences it differently, but as I say, it's a really hard one for me to answer at this point, other than it is it's really hard. It's a really, really difficult waiting.
There's a nice comment here. Let me read it from another mum in the group. I'll read it out quickly and then we're going to finish, everyone. I had that feeling throughout my first trimester, having had many miscarriages previously, and once I began to feel the baby kick, I felt more reassured. It helped that my partner and I went for a couple of private scans at our local clinic to put our minds at rest. Yeah, I still have some anxiety when the baby has quiet days and kicks less. Hope this helps.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Elisha, thank you for joining us. It's a real privilege to have you here.
My pleasure.
I'll put your website wherever I post this so everyone can find you. And thank you to the ladies for joining us and for really valuable to hear your experiences and your questions. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you all for your questions. And I also to say that if anyone does want to ask me anything at any point or to email or something, that's okay. Please do reach out. I can't give specific advice kind of in this, partly in this context, but also, if we're not working together, but I'm really happy to answer questions and things. So do.
Thanks, love.
I'm going to have a look back down through the messages. So yeah.
That's